Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at Aesop's Fables, taking specifically a look at morality and messaging when it comes to our writing. Aesop's Fables. Aesop's Fables, or Aesopia, is a collection of fables credited to Aesop, a slave and storyteller who lived in ancient Greece between 620 and 564 BC. Of varied and unclear origins, the stories associated with his names have descended to modern times through a number of different sources and continue to be reinterpreted in different verbal registers and in popular as well as artistic media. Reading the version that I have, I actually found that there were several different stories that came from outside of what would have been understood as from ancient Greece. For instance, there was a story that referenced Jupiter, who was the Roman version of Zeus. Now, there's no way, if given the timeline is correct, that Aesop would have been able to actually have told a story pertaining to Jupiter. Instead, they would have used the word Zeus to reference the god of the time. In addition, there's also another story where you have a priest referencing the Bible. So here we have an understanding that the Aesop's Fables is more of a collection of different stories that have been told throughout history that particularly focus on a couple different things. The things that they're referencing tend to have very short stories but have a moral behind it. In addition, they also focus on animals as the main mode of storytelling. So when we're talking about morality, we're talking about very small sections of this is what the result is, or here's how we can interpret the story. Now, in modern storytelling, this is not seen very often, and we'll get into that a little bit later. The dog and the shadow. It happened that the dog had got a piece of meat and was now carrying it home in his mouth to eat it in peace. Now, on his way home, he had to cross a plank laying across a running brook. As he crossed, he looked down and saw his own shadow reflected in the water beneath. Thinking it was another dog with another piece of meat, he made up his mind to have that also. So he made a snap at the shadow in the water. But as he opened his mouth, the piece of meat fell out and dropped into the water, and was never seen more. Beware lest you lose the substance by grasping at the shadow. Basically, here is that we have to be grateful for what we have. Too much in today's society, it's easy for us to take a look at social media and say, hey, they have everything that I want because they are popular, or they have money, or they have any number of things. But we tend to forget that we can have things that have value for us. The town mouse and the country mouse. Now you must know that the town mouse, once upon a time, went to visit his cousin in the country. He was rough and ready, this cousin, but he loved his town friend and made him heartily welcome. Beans, bacon, cheese, and bread were all he had to offer, but he offered them freely. The town mouse rather turned up his long nose at this country fare, and said, I cannot understand, cousin, how you can put up with such poor food such as this, but, of course, you cannot expect anything better in the country. Come you with me, and I will show you how to live. When you have been in the town a week, you will wonder how you ever could have stood a country life. No sooner said than done. The two mice set off for the town and arrived at Town Mouse's residence late in the night. You will want some refreshment after our long journey, said the polite Town Mouse, and took his friend into the grand dining room, where they found the remains of a fine feast, and soon the two mice were eating up jellies and cakes and all that was nice. Suddenly they heard growling and barking. What is that? Said the country mouse. It is only the dogs of the house, answered the other. Only, said the country mouse, I do not like that music with my dinner. Just at that moment the door flew open. In came two huge mastiffs, and the two mice had to scamper down and run off. Goodbye, cousin, said the country mouse. What? Going so soon? Said the other. Yes, he replied. Better beans and bacon in peace than cakes and ale in fear. The simple morality here is that sometimes, for most people, having peace is better than having extravagance. This is something that we see throughout history, but is often too easily tossed aside by people who want to tell amazing stories. One of the things about being human is that we actually try to have, we desire more than what we actually have. The wisdom here is that what's sometimes better for most people is that not to have the extravagance, but to be grateful for what we have, particularly when it comes to peace. Better beans and bacon, the sustenance, the things that we need to survive, than the extravagance when there's risk to oneself. The Fox and the Crow. A fox once saw a crow fly off with a piece of cheese in its beak and settled on a branch in a tree. "That's for me, as I am a fox," said Master Reynard, and he walked up to the foot of the tree. "Good day, Mistress Crow," he cried. "How well are you looking today? How glossy are your feathers? How bright is your eye? I feel sure your voice must surpass that of other birds, just as your figure does. Let me hear but one song from you, that I may greet you as Queen of the Birds." The crow lifted up her head and began to crawl her best, but the moment she opened her mouth, the piece of cheese fell to the ground, only to be snapped up by the Master Fox. "That will do," said he. "That was all I wanted. In exchange for your cheese, I will give you a piece of advice for the future. Do not trust flatterers." The people who want things from other people and are unwilling to get it for themselves will find different ways of trying to get that for themselves. So one of the ways that they're talking about here is actually flattery. If you are able to distract somebody with compliments or anything else, you are more likely to get what you want, even if it's at the expense of the person that you're trying to get it from. The Lion and the Mouse. Once when the lion was asleep, a little mouse began running up and down upon him. This soon wakened the lion, who placed his huge paw upon him and opened his big jaws to swallow him. "Pardon, O king," cried the little mouse. "Forgive me this time. I shall never forget it. Who knows but what I may be able to do you a turn some of these days." The lion was so tickled at the idea of the mouse being able to help him that he lifted up his paw and let him go. Some time after, the lion was caught in a trap. The hunters who desired to carry him alive to the king tied him to a tree, and while they went in search of a wagon to carry him on. Just then the little mouse happened to pass by, and seeing the sad plight in which the lion was, went up to him and soon gnawed away the ropes that bound the king of beasts. Was I not right?" said the little mouse. "Little friends may prove great friends." This is an old story from the Aesop Fables that we see pop up again and again and again. Sometimes the things that we do for others tend to be returned back to us right when we need them the most. The Wolf and the Kid. A kid was perched on the top of a house. Looking down, he saw a wolf passing under him. Immediately he began to revile and attack his enemy. "Murderer and thief," he cried, "what do you here near honest folks' houses? How dare you make an appearance where your vile deeds are known?" "Curse away, my young friend," said the wolf. "It is easy to be brave when you are at a safe distance." One of the reasons why I chose this one is because we see this today in society, particularly when we're talking about social media. There's a term called keyboard warrior, where people are attacking other people because they're at a safe distance. There's a computer between the two of them, but that doesn't make the attack any less vile. If we were held responsible for what we said on the internet, far more likely that the things would not be said at all. The Woodman and the Serpent. One wintry day, a woodman was trampling home from his work when he saw something black lying on the snow. When he came closer, he saw that it was a serpent, to all appearance dead. He took it up and put it in his bosom to warm while he hurried home. As soon as he got indoors, he put the serpent down on the hearth before the fire. The children watched it and saw it slowly come to life again. Then one of them stooped down to stroke it. But the serpent raised its head and put out its fangs and was about to sting the child to death. So the woodman seized his axe and with one stroke cut the serpent in two. "Ah," he said, "no gratitude for the wicked." Here's one of the things that I wanted to point out, because this is a prevalent thing when we're talking about storytelling. Typically, we try to have stories where even the bad person has some sort of redemption arc. The problem is that you have different types of antagonists in your story. You have the redeemable ones, and then you have the irredeemable ones. An example of this would be Zuko in The Last Airbender, whereas an irredeemable one would be Fire Lord Ozai or Princess Azula. These are cases where you have the difference between the redeemable ones and the irredeemable ones. The problem is that because our culture is so forgiving when it comes to the background of a character. So say if you have a character who is an irredeemable character where they've done terrible things and they have continued to do those terrible things regardless of anybody else's response. If you just show that they have a tragic background where they have gone through tough times, people are very apt to forgive them and try to allow them back into society. But the problem is that they are wicked by every sense of the imagination. It's not because they are necessarily deficient in a genetic or nature way, but because of the situation that they're in, they don't find the ability to repent of their deeds, and therefore are far more willing to continue doing it than somebody who is repentant, or they turn away from the evil deeds that they've done. The Jay and the Peacock. A jay venturing into a yard where Peacock used to walk found there a number of feathers which had fallen from the peacocks when they were melting. He tied them all to his tail and started down towards the peacocks. When he came near them, they soon discovered the cheat. Striding up to him, pecked at him, and plucked away his borrowed plumes. So the jay could do no better than go back to the other jays, who had watched his behavior from a distance. But they were equally annoyed with him, and told him, "It is not only fine feathers that make fine birds." Here's the idea that we shouldn't be necessarily looking to impress people that don't care about. It's so easy for us as humans to try and spend so much time on trying to impress those around us. Typically, when we do this, we are actually trying to do it in a way that it actually says to the people that we actually care about, or the people who are like us, the people who have the same interests, that we don't care about them, that they are lesser than. There was a number of other stories that I found in my reading, and a lot of these were ones that people are familiar with. One was the Androcles and the lion, the story of a slave who escaped and found a lion who was in pain because of a thorn in his paw. Androcles saved it and actually wound up getting caught later. Come to find out that the lion was captured roughly about the same time, and the slave was actually thrown into the Colosseum with that lion. But because the lion recognized Androcles as the savior, then that lion was unwilling to actually cause harm to Androcles, and therefore the emperor pardoned them both, sent Androcles off to where he wanted to, and then released the lion into the wild. Another story was a stag and a horse were having a disagreement. What ended up happening was that the horse was willing to be put under bridle to get back at the stag. The problem is that once the horse was under bridle and saddle, the human was unwilling to give up what he had gained in this transaction. And this is how people can be. When you give people an opportunity to take advantage of you, they will take advantage of you. Particularly when we're talking about trying to get revenge on somebody, that will end up coming back to bite us in the end. So all of these are different ways that we can actually tell short stories, or different ways of implementing these types of moralities into our stories to add a emotional depth to them. So how do we actually apply these to our stories? One of the ways that we can actually do this is actually weave this in and out of our stories throughout the totality of the story itself. This doesn't necessarily have to be the main plot, but what you could actually do is you actually have these characters go through these same things. Like for instance with the horse and the stag. You could have a character have desire to have revenge on somebody else. And when they bring that other person in to get the revenge, that other person will take advantage of the situation and actually cause harm to the character that wanted the revenge at the beginning. So a way you could say this is doing is you have character A doesn't like character B. And so character A tries to get character B kicked out by blackmailing him by using character C. Now what ends up happening is that when character B is removed from the situation, character C now has evidence of character A's wrongdoing and can actually end up being a bigger issue for character A. This doesn't mean that necessarily that it's going to necessarily be catastrophic for character A, but this is a way of complicating the situation to add more depth or tension to the story. Another way we can do this is that you have a sly person try to flatter himself or themselves into a situation and end up being found out and actually causing more harm than good. So for instance, you say you have the antagonist is trying to get a certain event to take place, and they flatter and they cajole and they get a shortcut to what they want. But what ends up happening is that it doesn't work out the way that they wanted to. That because of the way that they went about getting this action taken care of, they actually undo what they're trying to do in the first place. These are all just different ways that you can add to our stories, that we can tell different messaging in the stories so that they can resonate with our readers. But that's all I had for today. As always, I will be linking the resources I use in the description below. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please leave it in the comment section below. Until next time, bye.
I am a poor, wayfaring stranger. I'm traveling through this world of woe, yet there's no sickness, toil, nor danger in that bright land to which I go.